All right, welcome everyone to our CyberWise chat. I'm Diana Graber, author of Raising Humans in a Digital World, here as always with Dr. Pamela Rutledge, who is the director of the Media Psychology Research Center. Hi, Pam. How are you?
Hi there. Nice
Uh,
to see you.
yeah, today Pam and I are going to talk about how to make games safe for kids. And you might notice there's only two of us today. Unfortunately, we heard that Candela Montero from Epic Games is unable to join us today. They had a conflict, and that made Pam and I realize that, you know what, there's humans at all of these companies, and even the humans that are responsible for keeping kids safe get busy. And guess what? That's a great reminder that it's on us to keep kids safe. And we're so lucky because there's a million ways to do that when kids play games. And Pam and I feel like we got like a graduate degree in game design over the weekend, boning up for this today. And I know so much more than I knew Friday. How about you, Pam?
You bet.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't never thought about parental controls with such intensity as we have
Yes,
for the last few days.
exactly. And there's so many ways to keep kids safe. So we're excited to talk about that today. We're going to try to accomplish three things in half an hour. Number one, we're going to look at all the different levels of parental controls, and there's a lot of them. Number two, we're going to talk about what's appropriate for kids to play at every age and stage. And finally, we're going to talk about mitigating the possible dangers. So, Pam, I want to start with you talking about kind of the big picture when it comes to parental controls and gaming.
Well, this is going to sound like we're hauling out the same soapbox, but the very first step in parental controls has to be a household understanding or a set of household rules for video games and device use. So that once there's that understanding, from there you can then establish controls on individual games. But as we'll talk about, when you get to the game level, you can set controls both at the platform level, like on the Xbox, or within a game itself, like in Roblox or Fortnite.
Yeah. And just a little bit of terminology here. So platforms, it's what the game is actually played on. You know, it sounds really obvious, but games can actually be played on a lot of different things. They can be played on personal computers, on dedicated gaming consoles attached to a TV, on cell phones, on dedicated handheld devices like Nintendo systems. And there's really three big brands that stand out when you're talking about the handheld devices, and that's Nintendo, PlayStation, and Xbox. Each of them takes up about 25 to 40% of the market. And according to Pew Research, boys and younger teens are much more likely to play games on a console. 96% of boys have ever played games on a console compared to 76% of girls. So, do you want to say
Wow.
about the difference between platforms and the game where we
Yeah,
have?
so the for first of all, there's a really great website that you should all know about, which is the Entertainment Software Ratings Board. Now, granted, this is funded by the gaming company, but they have some excellent resources under their Parent Resources tab, tools for parents that go through every single platform and what the options are for privacy and other types of parental controls. So they go into much more depth than we do here. They also have a nice section on setting some house rules so that you aren't starting with from zero, so that you have some understanding of how much play is okay. You know, as we talk about all of these rating boards, and there's an international one too, don't rely on other people to make a judgment for you. You really do need to be involved. Ask kids what they like, why they like something. Kids have a really different frame of reference. You might be surprised. You look at something and you're horrified because they're blowing off zombie heads. And for the kid, they're not thinking of that as violence, they're thinking of it as points. So you really need to have an understanding of what they're seeing and the meaning making that they're taking out of it. Um, at the same time, I know a lot of us are concerned about kids playing violent video games and playing too much. And so I think a statement that helps your child know that if it starts to bother them, they can come talk to you. Hey, sometimes some people get anxious when they play these games too much, or some people get frustrated, and that can upset them or make them anxious or depressed. So if that happens to you, let's talk rather than saying this is a terrible game and you can't ever play this in your whole life, which of course just makes it all the more desirable.
Yeah, and that's such a good point, Pam, because as you know, like I'm around a lot of middle schoolers, and this gameplay really spills over into real life, whether the kids actually play or not. they're aware of the language and what the game is, and they talk about it and what they are and all of that. So it really is part of their little culture at this age. So it's so important for parents to understand the culture and understand the things they can do to keep kids safe when they're playing. So what?
And
Oh, go ahead.
sorry. I was just going to say, and recognize the importance socially to kids in having this knowledge.
Right.
Because being good at a game or understanding a game or understanding the language that goes with a game can sometimes mean the difference between hanging out with this group or that group. It has a whole different layer of value, as you were saying. It's all part of the kid culture. So it's, where I might be horrified, it's really important to tread softly until I understand what they're thinking and what they're trying to get from it.
Yeah, I mean, I learned that firsthand with my own kids because I was really a reticent parent about letting kids play video games, which I've heard nothing but grief about ever since now that my kids are older. When I finally started playing with them, it's like I got sucked in and the things are really fun, and they're not, it really wasn't what I expected at all. And there's so many ways to safeguard it. So if you don't want your kids playing with strangers, there's ways to control that. I wanted to just spend a minute going over the three big platforms. I'm going to give you some things that I learned about the three platforms, but I just want to tell you, if you're a parent and you want to set up parental controls on any of these, I'm going to tell you to do what kids do when they want to learn about something. Go to YouTube, type in parental controls on the Nintendo. You will get access to excellent tutorial videos that will walk you through step by step visually how to set up parental controls. It's so easy to do. But just as a broad overview, Nintendo, what I learned, is probably the most family oriented console on the market. You can manage everything on what's called the Nintendo Switch Parental Control app. It's available both on iOS and Android. To access it, you need to set up a Nintendo account. Nintendo Switch Lite is best for those who play away from the TV. Parents can set time limits on how long or how late a kid plays. They can pause the game temporarily if they feel like their kids need a break. They can preset age options for limiting which games kids play. And each game gives the option for parents to decide whether their children can text with others or not. And that's important. Like, do you want your kids doing communication within these devices or not? They're all pretty similar. Go ahead, Pam. I know you have
Oh no,
something.
I was just going to say, let parents know the one thing that kids wish their parents understood about gaming before they get too
Yeah,
excited about the
this is
pause
so
button.
funny. So every year after I teach cyber civics, I give kids this little quiz, and I always say, what is the one thing that you wish parents knew most about technology? The biggest answer I ever get is that you cannot push pause on a game. And I think that's really important for parents to remember, because a lot of times when kids play games, they're with their friends and they're on a squad or a team, and their objective is to do something, and they all have to work together to get to the end. And if mom says, 3 minutes in, you have to turn that off and come to dinner, it's not like there's a pause button, like they're in the middle of a game. So maybe be aware of that, set up time limits ahead of time so your child's not surprised. So I always thought that was really just real quick too, I want to quickly cover the other two. Xbox also offers a family settings app so parents can manage their activities from Apple or Android phones. They offer a ton of filters. Parents can get activity reports about what their kids are playing and how much time they spend gaming. They can create custom time schedules for each day of the week, which I think is pretty cool. Kids love boundaries, so that's a good way to do that. Parents can pause a game. Good luck with that. We'll see. Your screen time is up message until they get the okay to play again. And then very similarly, PlayStation parents can also set up parental controls online. Parents should make sure to set up a system restriction passcode so no one else can change the settings. Good luck with that. Kids are very good at guessing passcodes. So
Yeah, don't use the dog's name.
yeah, but my recommendation is, like, any of these settings, do it with your child together. Like, say, hey, look at, just like you had training wheels when I bought you a bike, or you're going to take driver's lessons before you drive a car, you're going to get some parental controls in your game until you learn how to play it safely. So let's see what they offer and let's decide together what's appropriate for you at your age. I think kids will appreciate that transparency and honesty. Don't you, Pam?
Absolutely. And it allows them to not feel like you're sneaking around or you're not trusting them. It's a very straightforward thing. And it allows you then also to have future discussions. So you say, well, if these are bothering you, come talk to me and we'll talk about whether, when, or what has to happen for these things to be lifted. It gives them a lot more agency in the process, and it actually teaches them self-regulation.
Exactly. And then finally, a little more about PlayStation. I thought this was kind of cool. Parents can set playtime duration and playable hours for every day or specific days of the week. When the time is ending, players will receive notifications to save and quit the game. So all of these are great little tools. And again, decide what's appropriate for your family. We also offer, as you know, a tech agreement on the CyberWise website. It's free. You can download it anytime and use it for gaming as well. So just so important now that we're going to get into talking about developmental ages and stages. These young kids, they just don't have the hardware upstairs in place to say, hey, I should probably stop playing. It's probably time for me to do something else. It's not going to happen. So help them out by having these preset boundaries before you even let them play. All right, so we know that there's great controls at the platform level, whatever the platform is that your child uses. But Pam, let's talk about the games themselves, and we'll start here with the very youngest of players. I think you know a little bit about what the little ones are doing. Before we start, I did learn that in children ages 2 to 17, a large survey showed that 71% start playing video games at that very young age. So
Well, and I think we have video games are so varied. I mean, we say that like it's, like it's all one thing and there's just three different kinds of boxes, but this field is huge. And so the games for very young kids tend to be interactive learning games. They aren't, the 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds are not playing Call of Duty. They're playing with Elmo, learning their letters. All of those things are great things to do with a child. So it isn't like they're off playing a video game. They actually can't do it by themselves, but they get a lot of benefit for you providing that kind of instruction and guidance as they go through one of those games. They remind me of the psychologist Vygotsky, who you may or may not have heard of. And what he said was that optimal learning happens when you're giving a child a kind of a lane, right, between what they can do and what they can't do, but that difference is sort of a reasonable amount, and then you're providing the scaffolding or the help to kind of get them along so that they're improving their skills. And I think that that's really the point of those young games. So don't panic. Don't read the American Psychiatric Association screen time recommendations and flip out. These can be really valuable and important tools that just happen to be on a screen.
right. I was laughing because I was thinking to myself that when my girls were young, and they played, it's not around anymore, Club Penguin. Do you remember that game? And I remember, sitting with them as they're playing and they're like getting flirted with by other penguins and not knowing what to do, like being like, what should my penguin do? But it was such a great opportunity to talk, like role play things that eventually they had to deal with in real life, like, well, don't be mean, be nice back, but keep your boundaries,
Right.
But I thought this is so fun. I'm teaching my kids basically sex education with penguins, how to handle a real life situation. So again, underscores how important it is to like play these with your kids, see what they like, use it as a learning opportunity. So I did want to mention one game that I think is kind of cute for the younger kids, Animal Crossing. Just as an FYI, if you guys follow the CyberWise website, we actually have learning hubs on a lot of these games that I'm going to talk about today. One of them is Animal Crossing. We have a little hub on it if you want to learn more. But it's actually rated for the 7+ kids, and it's kind of a fun little game. You play it on the Nintendo Switch. Players, they start out like on a deserted island and they work together to create communities. There's no battles, no rules, no time limits, no one to defeat, no one to fight. They're basically like doing things like picking fruit, fishing, redecorating their homes. It's like a little place where they live and they create things, together or alone. So kind of a nice way to start out with sort of a safe environment.
Sort of like starter sims.
Yeah, exactly. So, there are some safe little options for the kids who are before preteen, but again, do it with them because there may be interactions with others that you want to know about. So,
Right.
All right. So we're going to jump to the preteen ages, and Pam, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about. Well, first of all, these are the kids that really ramp up their interest when it comes to technology and interacting with others. So where are these kids developmentally?
I mean, I think at this point, what these kids are doing is learning. They are just learning problem solving. They are just learning critical thinking skills. So they're not all that good at it. And there's a huge difference between a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old. At the same time, this is a period where they're starting to become much more aware of social pressures and are going to be much more interested in the games that either their peers are playing or, more importantly, the slightly older kids, because of course, until you're older, you always want to be older, and so you want to emulate what's going on. So as you can set the controls to help them develop these skills. You can limit playtime to encourage a balanced range of activities. As Diana was saying, don't just do this on by surprise. Say, okay, you have 45 minutes, or you have an hour, or you have 10 minutes, or whatever your agreement is, so that when you need to pull the plug and say, then we're going to do something else, um, they're prepared. The other thing is, if a child is really into gaming and you want them to do something else, do not turn off the game and say, now go do something else, because that creates a terrible vacuum that makes the game seem more appealing. Come prepared with an alternative. It's time to turn off the game. Why don't you walk down the street and play with Amy? Or it's time to turn off the game. Why don't you get out your paints? So that there's something to occupy them, and that's not making that decision making and that attentional shift so difficult. The other thing is that we were hearing about from Fortnite is that they offer restricted or cabined accounts that restricts access to certain aspects of the games while letting them continue to play. So it restricts some kinds of content, it restricts some kinds of connection with other players. However, if your 10-year-old can add and subtract, they will very likely have created an account that says they're over 13. So the cabined accounts have some limited value if a child has set up a Fortnite account with an older age.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important thing to underscore here, because it's the same thing as with any social media. Kids want to be older. That's just part of being a kid. You don't want to be with the little kids. You want to be with the big kids. And so, I mean, I can't tell you of a kid who I've heard of who hasn't fibbed about their age, because number one, they think fibbing online is okay because we haven't taught them otherwise. And number two is it's so easy to do. And even though there are mechanisms that can catch this, they're not implemented by any of the game companies that I know of. So a child can easily put in any birth date and make themselves older, and then they're not protected by these wonderful things that companies offer, like cabin accounts on Fortnite. So that's, I think, a number one thing that you can do to help your kid be safe is have them be honest when they sign up for their accounts.
Right. But I think your penguin example is a really good one, Diana, because you can restrict who they talk to online. And for younger kids, that's probably a good thing to do. But you're not teaching them how to deal with
Right.
the people that they're going to meet. And that's what you're trying to do, is protect them from the things they are going to face, not keep them from facing the things that they
Yeah.
don't know how to deal with.
And I'll tell you another interesting story that really I still am kind of amazed at. But a few years back, I work with a lot of Waldorf schools, which, if you're not familiar with them, they're largely keep their kids off of technology until they're older. So, these aren't kids that are on computers a ton. And I was teaching one of our online safety lessons to a group of seventh graders, and just, asked a question: how many kids here have ever been approached by a predator or somebody you didn't know online? Every hand shot up, every last hand in the room. So it is not uncommon for kids to be approached by a stranger on places they are online. So that's a really important thing for you to teach your kids how to deal with, or to protect them from, or to have, capacity to know what to do. It's one of the things we teach in cyber civics, because it does happen so often. Like, here's what you do. Here's how do you talk to. That's the other thing I
Right.
want to point out with a lot of these games, in platform games, is that there's a ways to report misbehavior, and it's important for kids to do that. We learned that Fortnite just implemented voice reporting, so you don't even have to type something in. They keep a recorded a history of what happened, and you can do a verbal reporting. So to teach your kids how to use those mechanisms is really important, because it empowers them to, like, do something if something bad happens. Like, not to have like recourse. So, and Pam, you had a great story about Jordy doing this on one of the platforms that she's on.
Right. Well, my daughter Jordan is 13 and she's a Minecraft expert, I just have to tell you. And so she now has an administrator status on a Minecraft server, and her job is to police players who are not playing nicely or who are hacking the system and giving themselves special skills that they aren't supposed to have in world. And it's very interesting to watch her deal with people, learn how to connect with people, and set limits for others, which is a tremendous learning experience. She's
Yeah.
also really good at building stuff.
You know what? That's a great learning experience. And it other also brings to mind that, many platforms on the internet today do rely on users to report bad behavior. That's how YouTube operates. They don't, it's impossible for any platform to hire enough human moderators or to program enough, technical moderators to catch every bad thing that's going to happen online. So many, if not most, rely on its users to flag poor behavior. So, what does that mean? How do we prepare our kids to recognize what it is, and how do we empower them to know what to do? I think those are the three things
Right.
we teach our kids.
Yeah, a lot of things get through because the people who are sending out bad content aren't using the words that the algorithms screen for. They're using code.
Yeah.
So, you can't expect these companies to be able to catch them all because they can't keep up with that. So
Yeah.
that's why this is so important to give kids these skills so that they're empowered to take action. This will have lifelong benefits.
Yeah. And we got a little off script here. We were going to talk about
Oh, yes, sorry.
Roblox, but I'm glad that we did, because it reminded me that when kids play these games, I hear it from a lot of kids. They talk about the ways they bypass the moderators, the words they use to like trick them, and they change like daily. So, kids are super savvy to know how to get, no matter what kind of controls these games offer. But the big two, really, I think preteens right now is still Minecraft. If you're not familiar with it, it's a sandbox survival game that remains one of the most popular games right now. Minecraft is a game made up of blocks, creatures, and community. A lot of people think of it as an online Lego. They're creating things. It has a rating of 7 and an ESBR rating of everyone 10 plus.
Right. The one thing I would just add about Minecraft is that it does have different modes.
Yeah.
So you can be in building mode or you can be in survival mode. And in survival mode, people run around and, just try and, find items for their collections, but they can also kill you. And so you have a certain number of lives. Now, the kids don't take the being killed personally, but it decreases their level. So if your child is anxious, I might want to talk to them about limiting the survival mode so that they have a time to build up their skills without being under attack or at risk for the things that, losing a level or losing some of their stuff.
Yeah, and this is a game, again, it has great parental controls. You can decide if you want your kid to chat with anybody or nobody or just their friends, or if you who you want on their friends list. So all of that you should set up with your child ahead of time. The other big one is Roblox. I hear a lot about this from kids in the classroom. 40 more than 40 million user generated experiences are on Roblox. It's like there's so many things you can do. You can build your world up from its scratch. You can build your own world up from scratch. You can play with other people's worlds. It's a super interactive multiplayer game, really interesting, and it has gained a ton of popularity. You probably know more about this through Jordy as well.
Well, unlike Minecraft, which is sort of one big world where people do these different things in different parts, Roblox actually has a full menu of games. Some of them built, I'm sure, by Roblox, but most of them are community generated games. People who,
It's all the experiences.
yeah, well, they aren't games, they're experiences, right? So it's always changing and always new, which makes it really appealing. But kids do tend to pick a game that they like and spend time in it. Jordan was really interested in one called Wildcraft, which was, packs of wolves, which is sort of something she really likes, and growing the baby wolves up and, feeding them and doing all these things. But not only should she do that, but then she would video her screen time and make little videos out of it to share with her friends. So there was learning going on far beyond the game that was really interesting.
Yeah, and another thing kids do a lot is they'll go to YouTube and watch kids playing games
Yes,
because then they can learn how to play games better. So it's a whole experience, right? A
the
couple
whole
other
thing.
things about to remember that Roblox is really social gaming, and part of the allure is making connections with strangers to build these experiences together. So if you're uncomfortable with your younger kids doing that because of, you know, possible strangers contacting them, there is a way to disable that. They have really good parental controls. Um, Roblox is an interesting one. I listened to a great podcast on how I built this. If you're a podcast listener, it was so interesting. It was with the man who built Roblox from the very beginning, and his interest was really getting kids fired up about STEM. And he started out with just straight educational apps, and they weren't really being used, or kids weren't excited about them. So he decided to change it into more of a experience or gaming or interactive thing to get kids interested in science and technology, which has now grown into Roblox. So really interesting to read the backstory on it, and it kind of gives you a different perspective. He also talks about his struggles on keeping kids safe. So it's a great listen.
That sounds great.
So I want to just fast forward here a little bit to our teenagers. So where are teenagers developmentally, Pam?
Well, teenagers, young teenagers are seeking independence. They feel very grown up, but they aren't really grown up yet in terms of their psychosocial maturity or their decision making skills. And one of the things that sort of fires up late is this sort of ability to do long range planning and risk assessment, which is why these young teens often do really stupid things. Uh, the recommended controls at this level are going to be looser than they would be for 13 and under, who shouldn't be on some of these games anyway. But because they are teens, the social function is going to be huge for them. So you need to allow the chat function, but I would recommend periodic check-ins. The other thing parents should know is that trash talking is a really frequent on games, and to the point where it's sort of the language and it's not as meaningful as it will look to you. You'll be horrified if you see some of these conversations. So that's why talking to the teen is so important, to understand if something's bothering them or if that's just how people are talking with one another. I can't say that I condone that, but it is what happens in these gaming environments. The other thing that I think is really important is to discuss these in-app purchases. That's one thing with Roblox. There are actual real opportunities to spend real money in a lot of these games. And so to understand what the constraints are, what you're allowed to do, who's paying for it if you're going to buy something. With Jordy, she has an allowance. She doesn't have any ability to actually buy things herself. She has to go through us and then pay us back from her bank. But there are a lot of different ways of handling that. But you have to be aware that buying things buying virtual things, which seems crazy to most of us, is a very real and important thing to a lot of these kids who play games.
Right, like buying outfits for your avatar to, look cool. I mean, I hear about that all the time from kids. It's what they like to slip on, which seems crazy, but that's the culture. I did want to talk a little bit about Fortnite. We put this in the category for 13 and up because you are supposed to be that old to play the game. I really recommend playing this one yourself. I play it. That sounds crazy. I'm terrible at it. I usually end up killing myself off. Play it with my daughter sometimes and they laugh at me. But it's a survival game with 100 players where they fight each other to see who is the last man standing. It's super fast paced action game, a lot like the Hunger Games sort of in gameplay. Evidently, there's 125 million estimated players on Fortnite. But I did want to say something like before your kid, you think if this is an appropriate game for your kid, go to their website and watch the trailer. It's pretty violent, granted it's cartoon characters, but I wouldn't let a younger child play it because of the violence is pretty, it's kind of intense. And especially if you're doing it before you fall asleep at night, it would definitely hinder your sleep. I'm sorry. Even at my age, it hinders my sleep. So something to check out for sure. And again, like all the others, they offer awesome parental controls. You have to go into open an Epic Portal account in order to get it. You can modify your younger players' parental control settings can be modified in Fortnite, Rocket League, or Fall Guys. There are parental controls available on gaming platforms, such as all the ones we talked about earlier. And there's all kinds of information on their site on how to set up parental controls. Again, you can go to the Cyberwise website under our learning hubs. We have a hub about Fortnite. It has a link to all of their parental controls. So if you decide it's appropriate for your child, please go in there and set them up together with your child. Oh,
Yeah,
and with
this is, oh,
voice recording, just wanted to underscore that too. That's something new that they offered. In addition to be able to block, mute, and report other players, you can now submit an audio evidence when reporting suspected violations in their community roles. So I don't
yeah,
want
the
to.
popularity of Fortnite also is a good opportunity if your child is really committed to wanting to play that, to have discussions with them about how it's making them feel.
Yes.
I asked Jordy, do you play Fortnite? Because I was hoping she could, give me the inside scoop on this one. And she goes, nah, they're just all killing each other. So she's self-corrected. And I'm really happy about that. But you just need to check in with your child who may be feeling pressure to play it and find it bothersome so that you're providing them with some emotional support.
That's such a great point. Actually, today, especially kids, the research tells us that, especially during COVID, a lot of kids turn to games to self-soothe and to get away from the chaoticness of actual life, But again, it depends on what game you're talking about, because some of these games really are not a respite, perhaps. It could be just
Right.
as stressful as real life. I made a note here, and I really want to talk about this for a minute, because all of these games say to refer to the community rules, which is, kind of their code of ethics for these games. And that is so important to me. And it's something that we really spend a lot of time on in cyber civics. Number one, what is a community? Like, what does it mean to be part of a community, and what are your responsibilities? And that's pretty well defined in our real world, but it's really ill defined online. For example, kids lying about their age. They would never lie about their age in real life, but online it's real easy to do. So this idea of what are your responsibilities as a community member, and maybe together with your children, look at these community rules. Like, all of this stuff is not allowed. You're not allowed to bully others or harass others or use really mean words or to like lie, or any of that is not allowed. So, and for them to know that up front is really, really important.
Yes, and warn them that they could get banned by a moderator.
Totally. Like, Jordy's out there, folks. Beware. Um, so let's see here what else we have. Oh, talk a minute about the creative aspects of some of these
Right. Yeah, we're making them sound all pretty dire, and that's not really fair. All of these games, Fortnite, Minecraft, Roblox, all have opportunities to create, to build something, and they've inspired a lot of kids to learn how to code, to build what they call mods, which are small add-ons to a game. And so it's a very creative environment, because it actually not only encourages creativity, but it rewards it, because you can share it with other players and you get a lot of positive feedback that way as a player. And that's one of the benefits, I think, of the multiplayer modes, is that it allows players with similar interests to, create a forest, or to create a castle, or to, whatever it is that they're building, and really get some fun play, some fun experience, and some positive feedback.
Yeah. And before we go to our last little section here, I did want to say that we have the chat box and the Q&A open. If you have any questions before we end, feel free to put your questions in there. We'd be happy to address them. I wish I hadn't put this at the end, because again, like Pam just said, there are so many opportunities for creativity and to engage with like-minded peers that you might not be able to do in real life. That being said, there are some dangers just to be aware of. And the one I think that I hear the most about, and we got a lot of questions about this before the chat, is the possibility for kids to have contact with strangers online. And according to the FBI, as many as 500,000 predators are active online every day, targeting kids between 12 and 15. Their intentions include procuring sexual images from children and sometimes making physical contact with their victims. So, just be aware that any game where kids have contact with strangers puts them, at this potential risk. Talk to your kids about that. The biggest problem, I think, is sometimes these predators will lure kids off site, and I'm dealing with that with a couple people I know personally that have that problem happening right now with their own kids, that fell prey to this and were convinced in a very short amount of time to move the conversation to a private chat where the parent really doesn't have as much control, they can't get law enforcement to help them. It's a real serious situation. So, you know, whatever you can do to encourage your child or tell them, do not move a conversation off of that platform with someone you don't know. It's just not safe. I think that's probably the number one risk I would warn parents about.
Right. And a good way to deal with that ahead of time is not to just say don't talk to strangers, but to say, what would you say if a stranger said this? To do some role playing so that they've got a script in their head that's comfortable. And then I think also we might want to mention the White Hatter as a resource.
Yeah. He helped a friend of mine, and he's the best. If you don't know about him, look him up. The White Hatter. He's based in Canada, but I have a friend, as I mentioned, going through a really tough situation, and he was a terrific amount of help to her. So definitely recommend him as a resource. The other thing I wanted to talk about cyberbullying and this harsh language. 90% of game players have experienced or witnessed emotional abuse or bullying while playing video games. Nearly 7 in 10 have considered quitting because of what they witnessed, and more than 2 in 5 have experienced racism, and more than 1 in 4 have experienced hate speech on gaming platforms. So as Pam mentioned earlier, and I know this from talking to students, a lot of just really harsh language on these sites, and it's become normalized. Like that's how you play. And you think about it, like you're playing Fortnite, you're just about to kill somebody or cut their head off or whatever. You're not going to say, "Excuse me, sir, do you mind if I cut your head off?" "Oh, I'm so sorry." No, those are not the words that pop in your head when you're playing a violent game. So, you know, do be aware of that. So,
Yeah, and I think the other thing that parents worry about a lot is, I'm going to call it video game addiction.
yes.
The word addiction has very specific diagnostic criteria. Most of the people who are worried about their child being addicted to gaming are really just worried about overuse, about the child spending too much time and losing balance and not wanting to stop. And so this is one where setting up the tech agreement first is a very important step because it limits the amount of time per day. But if you have a child who's already playing, you didn't get to the step tech agreement, a lot of people don't, where if you're trying to get them to change their behaviors, don't create a vacuum. Give them something else to do. Don't make it as punitive, sort of wean them off of it to a level that feels healthier to you, but don't freak out. Don't take them to one of these video game addiction places because most of them don't know what they're doing, but they will charge you a lot of money for it. And the percentage of kids who are actually addicted to video games is very, very small. And most addictions do not present with only that problem. These are kids who might be anxious, or they might have OCD, or they might have other things going on that make them more predisposed
Yeah.
towards that kind of addictive behavior. Is
I
that too
was,
scary?
no, and I was actually thinking about that for a minute because I think for a lot of these kids, it's not like they're really addicted to the game, but they're addicted to each other. Like, you know, and their
Right.
kids, their friends are all playing and that's where their friends are. And so they want to hang out with their friends. So it's kind of a culture, you know? And so I'm always hoping that parents will like talk to each other and say like what's appropriate for our group of friends. And it's so much easier for a kid if, you know, there's 6 kids and all 6 moms say, look, I think an hour is enough. And all the kids have the same limits. So it's not like one kid's the outlier where he's got the mean mom that makes him log off after an hour. So as much as you can, you know, I think especially with our younger kids is to decide who they can play with and to have those agreements up front.
Yeah, and just because your child is sitting in front of a computer by themselves doesn't mean that it feels like they're alone to them. They're playing with people, they have a real sense of social presence, they feel like they're around their friends. So it is a very social experience. And so I think that's great advice, Diana, to try and create rules within a social group.
Yeah. And I just wanted to end with, for me anyway, with a story that I always love to tell. But um, I was talking to some kids and this boy who's, you know, sweet kid, he said he was playing one of these games and it was a new kid came on and they can tell when there's a newbie in a game. And so it's kind of a thing where all the other players like start parsing on this kid and using bad words and all this stuff. And the child I was speaking to said he could tell the new kid was very young by the tone of his voice. They were on Discord, so he could hear the kid's voice, and he heard the kid sobbing. And it's so sad. And so he said he reached out to the kid and said, "Look, you can mute. Why don't you play with your mute on so you don't have to hear all this?" And I thought, well, that's a really nice thing for you to do, to reach out to this kid. So I don't know.
But what a
There's
how great to use a child's understanding of a game to set some protections.
Mm.
You know, what are
Teach
the
somebody
things you're worried
else.
about in this
Yeah,
game? How would you solve that?
right. And for a child to reach out to another child to teach them how to mitigate the dangers. And that's
Yeah.
really, I mean, we could spend another, hour talking about parental controls and all of these games. Nothing is going to protect your child as much as the child protecting themselves. And
Boy,
just,
that's the truth.
teaching them just really basic things and waiting until they're old enough to implement those things. And I think that's going to be my last word today.
Yep.
It's so important. Teach this, what's between their ears before you
That's
use
right.
controls. So, any last words for you, Pam?
Well, I think, have those conversations so you know what's up there, so you know what needs to be put in.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I hope that we did okay without our guest today. We did our best. If you might notice, we're kind of reading from some notes here, but I learned a lot more than what I already knew about parental controls and games. And I really came to the same conclusion I come to every time. There are a ton of tools for you parents. Go use them and help your kids learn for themselves.
Absolutely.
Right.
And we won't see everyone till January, so
Anyway,
have
we have two
wonderful.
we have a couple really exciting things lined up, and we can't decide which to do in January and which to do in February. You'll be hearing from us, but one of them, I'm going to spill the beans here, is we're really concerned about technology and neurodivergent children. We have been getting barraged with questions about that. So we do have an expert on our team who's going to talk to you about that, and she will show up, I promise. Sony, she's not only deals with that with one of her own children, but she's getting her master's in the topic. So I think that should be a really interesting conversation. And we hope to have some really excellent tools to offer to you.
So that'll be really fun. I'm really eager to hear what she has to say.
All right. Well, thank you all so much, and have a great week. Thank you, Pam.
Okay. Bye.